the quicker that you can compound that.
So welcome to the Ryan Magic Show. Today we're here with my good friend Rohan. As you guys know, you just heard the bio. This guy's an absolute legend. Man, we go way back. But I just realized when we're doing our eye gaze just then, we haven't really spent lots of one-to-one time. So, it's, I would say, even though it's been a space between we chat last, there's lots of space to grow in our friendship. And I'm looking forward to connecting more in the chat today. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, dude. So there's lots of things we could discuss on the show today. I like to let the interviews run, but what I was curious to know when I was eye gazing and that just popped into my mind is what are the I'm going to say the three hardest things that you've ever gone through in your life before you started in business. So you think about an impact on how you live and who you are now.
Ever gone through before I started business? That's a great question. So growing up, I'm not sure. I don't know if we've ever talked about this. So growing up from like 0 to 11 years old, I grew up in an extremely wealthy family. Born in India, raised there till I was 11, moved to Canada, and went from that, like living to a point where I was flying first class, flying business class, living in luxury hotels, like literally out of my mom's womb almost. And my parents gave all of that up because of some family issues that went on back in India, moved to Canada, and moved to pretty much what would you call the ghetto, like literally it's considered the ghetto today. Back then I was like, oh fuck, I'm leaving India, moving to Canada. This can't be that much any worse. But realizing, looking back at where I went, going into that situation, coming from a different country, obviously going through the early stages of getting bullied and kind of language, and like I spoke English pretty fluently growing up, so I guess I'll have that, but it was, having that bit of an accent moving into it. That was one of the early challenges. Later on in life, another challenge that I had.
Before we move on from that, how old were you again when you went to Canada?
11.
11. So that is like the prime age of of kids trying to find their way in school and make friends and stuff like that. That's a big deal, man.
Yeah, it was tough. It was definitely very tough. Because obviously it was a whole new adapt, like leaving school, forget about just, leaving your suburb or moving to another suburb. It was leaving an entire country, leaving an entire understanding of what my being was. Moved to Canada, knew nobody, had no friends, had to build it all back up again from scratch and kind of go from there. That was challenging for sure.
You got bullied a bit?
Oh yeah, definitely did. Going into like grade 6, because I came in, I did 2 months of grade 6. It was summer, and then grade 7. So going into like grade 7, grade 8, definitely got bullied pretty heavily in terms of just kind of trying to figure out what the hell it was. Because back in India, school is just school, and it's just like everything's academically driven. Over here, it's so much more socially driven. It was very, very different mentality getting into that, and it kind of opened my eyes a little bit because I grew up at straight A's, honors as a kid. Coming here, I like school, I like learning, but I didn't like what I was going through. And as soon as I figured out that there was a different context and different outcome to what I was going to go through in school here, I kind of just like rebelled and went the other way. And then ended up in a situation where
do you think that's kind of because you're like, hang on a second, I was taught to believe that this was going to create success for me. Now the same thing that was earning me praise and recognition when I was in India is actually getting me bullied here. What the fuck? Like, thanks for setting me up. You're like, man, I got to change my goalposts here.
Yeah, pretty much. It's exactly what it was. That was one. And then over there, it's like, if you're not in the 99 percentile of the top in the class, you're pretty much dumb. Like that's literally what it was like. If you weren't getting like 99+% on exams and tests and stuff, like it was a tough environment, very tough environment. I learned a lot from that. Obviously that was probably some good challenges there. And then came here, didn't really care to go to school much. Post grade 10, kind of just turned into just my true entrepreneurial self started to come out. And then from there, transition into challenges that I had in career right after that. Because
before we go into that, I know you just wanted to skip ahead here, a little speedy Gonzalez. So what do you think inspired you to want to get into entrepreneurship? Because it's interesting. I'm curious to know now that you've that I really understand you've got, because you're very intelligent. I've always recognized and saw that, but I've also seen you as a very powerful social. You're obviously a gun salesperson. You're great at socializing and interacting with people. So you're a people person, and you are a, an intelligent academic as well. Like you're strategic. Like yeah. There's two questions here. The first one I want to know is, you now obviously are successful in business, and you've been very successful so far. So what do you think plays more of a part out of those two, strategic or people skills?
People skills.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hey, yeah,
100% it's people skills. But there's no doubt in my mind. I wouldn't even think about that. Like in today's day and age, I say this all the time, where it's like, if there's one skill that I'm grateful that I went through those challenges, is how to learn and adapt being around people.
that's powerful, man. Because most people, yeah, it's just the other generation, right? Like, were your parents, like really gunning for your success growing up?
Yeah. So growing up, I had always had a goal, and kind of something that I always said to my parents since I could remember. Like I was traveling all my life early on. I remember I had a vision of wanting to be a commercial airline pilot, and that's kind of what I always said. So everything that they did was in that runway of making me get to that school. I eventually did go to school for it. Did I end up there? No, but I did end up going to school for it, and they did gun for that success. But eventually, here we are, completely different
Yeah.
definition of success.
Yeah, and how have they found, like, were there times where you cop some flack for them for like that more rebellious phase, and then getting less school focused?
Yeah, going through grade 10, 11, and 12 was very rebellious. I started working at McDonald's and kind of just being very focused. So they could see that, I had an entrepreneurial side, but I also knew that I had hard work in kind of instilled into me, just at a young age. And, and they're like, throughout the high school, they knew skipping class. My mom would get called into the principal's office. I've got stories about that for a whole different podcast. If you want to talk about all the stories my mom's got from me skipping class and getting caught and all this stuff.
Naughty,
But
naughty.
kind of but she kind of always knew that at the end of the day, I was going to end up somewhere doing something that I would, no matter what, figured out my own. Because the pattern that I had from coming to Canada and moving forward was I always kind of had to figure it out. Like that was just kind of what it was. Just like get thrown into challenging environments and figure out how to come out successful on the other side of it, no matter how difficult things were.
Yeah.
Um,
So you talk about entrepreneur, like they could see I had an entrepreneurial spirit. Like where did that come from?
um, I don't know where it came from initially, but I just knew I kind of always.
Think about it.
Yeah, like if I go back and correlate it, find the cause of the entire thing, there's correlation and causation. But the cause of me wanting to be an entrepreneur was growing up in an entrepreneur environment. My uncle built one of the largest travel agencies in India to a point where my dad and him had opened an airline, and then my dad split and kind of went down that route. That's the wealthy side of my family came from.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that was the original foundational cause of being an entrepreneur, because I had created an association at a young age. Sorry. I created an association at a young age of, money, wealth, business. So in my head, subconsciously, I was always feeding that to myself, and not understanding what it was. I never really learned entrepreneurship. I never really was taught sales or anything like that. And I just kind of got myself into a situation where I was selling pocket bikes. And this story, I've told the story on plenty of different podcasts, like way more in depth, and we can get, if people want to listen to that story, we can talk about it somewhere else, go listen to somewhere else. But this one, I want to kind of share one of the challenges that came from it because of your question. And selling those pocket bikes, it taught me challenges in business that I would learn at a young age, because I almost got me expelled from school. Selling those pocket bikes, because I would literally talk about being marketing. Like I didn't understand what marketing was. I didn't understand what sales was. I knew one thing. I had something that my peers in high school wanted. So I just take it last period, skip, go home, pick it up, come back to school, and start ripping around the fucking parking lot, gaining attention. What is that? Marketing, right? Like that's literally what do I do for day? Marketing. So that's kind of where it all started.
So that's where you almost got expelled because of the ripping in the car park.
Ripping around because I got warnings and all this good stuff, and I was like, I don't give a fuck. I'm just gonna keep going until I keep getting sales. I'm just gonna keep going.
You know what, man? Most people skip that basic. It's like a guttural, just insatiable need to get sales. People miss that, and so they don't look at the common sense ways to get people in as clients. They look for the way that they're told on the internet that you should get clients. Like, but I'm not mastering Facebook ads. It's like, well, where are your people? Go there, speak to them, and get it happening. Just move in that, and that's exactly what you're doing as a kid. It's common sense, but it's not so common. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's kind of what ended up happening for me. And then that in itself, I did like over 6 figures in sales at the age of 15, selling bikes from China. Like when people want to talk about drop shipping, I was originally drop shipping before drop shipping was ever a cliche term in today's day and age, because that's literally what I was doing. And then took that, finished off, ended up getting to a point where I was running McDonald's, but I was one of the youngest managers in McDonald's corporate in Vancouver, running stores for them. And it just got to a point where the next phase of my challenging career began, and that was going to school. And I knew I wanted to be a pilot, went to school to be a pilot, got through 3/4 of the entire thing. So what was supposed to be a 24-month program, I was going to do it in 12. Just because I just literally committed to it, and I was like, fuck it, I'll spend 18 hours a day here if I have to. I don't care, I'll get it done. And 3/4 of the way through, I realized that this was more of a passion than it was a purpose, and I didn't want to be a pilot anymore. I wanted to be a pilot to enjoy it, not for a career.
Are you a pilot?
I had my pilot's license. I haven't gotten renewed since I've been building these companies, but it is a new goal of mine that's been reset to go back and get recertified.
Dude, I'd love for you to take me for a spin.
Done. Next time I come to Australia, I'll make sure I've got my license back, and then we'll go up and fly around Melbourne.
That sounds amazing. I actually also studied to get my casual pilot's license. What's that called? Private pilot's license. I just didn't have the money to get enough hours up, but I passed my academic test and did like 10-ish hours of flying. It's fun. It's really fun.
Yeah. So got that, dropped out of college, and then didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Completely had no idea. I had the opportunity to go back to McDonald's. McDonald's found out, like the corporate McDonald's found out that I wasn't in college anymore, got harassed to come back. But in the subconscious part of myself, I had that conversation going in the back of my head where if I went back there, I knew that was a career I was choosing, and I would have probably never deviated from that, because they were setting me up with, a car, a credit card with the company, like just a typical, corporate Canada or corporate America lifestyle, where it's like you literally have to not worry about anything, just go show up from, whether it's 9 to 5, 9 to 7, whatever, everything else is going to be taken care of. But it wasn't something.
How old were you when you dropped out of the pilot's license training?
19.
19. Dude, that's pretty rare that someone would choose to drop out of something before they have their next thing set. It's very rare. It just seems it seems really awesome, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
Good courage.
Very rare. And then literally lost, confused, trying to figure out what the hell to do. And I remember on Google at the time searching like top careers that I could do, and like just kind of going through different Google searches. And I came across an article, and I laugh every single time. I wish I took a screenshot of this article back in the day, because today this story makes it so much better. And it was like the top 8 things you can do in 2008 that you can make a 6-figure income in a very short period of time, because it was like that's kind of the context of the search history that I was going down. Yeah. Number 1 was drug dealing. Number 2 was being a hooker. Number 3 was sales.
So you went for the hooker.
The hooker. That's exactly what I went for. Yeah, but no, I went down the sales route, and I just that's when the correlation came back to my life of as a kid selling the pocket bikes, and I did some door-to-door sales kind of back then with Cutco knives, etc. But those were just brief little stints. And it wasn't even actually door-to-door. It was like selling to like family members and shit. It was fucking stupid. But that's kind of what I did. But and then I was like, well, who's going to hire a 19-year-old dropout kid out of college that has no idea what the hell he's going to do? The only corporate experience he's got, only work experience he's got is McDonald's. I literally just went on, my version of Gumtree, which is Craigslist at the time. You guys have Gumtree in Australia. Mm-hmm. And I just applied for every single sales job I could. Like every single sales job that was on there, I just applied. I didn't give a shit. Like it was like, fuck, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I don't get a phone call. Like that's kind of what my mentality was.
Yeah.
Fast forward to a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from a company that called me in. Lo and behold, it was a door-to-door sales company. And that's where my sales career started. Ended up getting hired by them, doing door-to-door for them. Almost got fired 3 weeks into being there because I just wasn't producing, because it was a very different environment of like knocking 120 doors a day. You had like all these quotas that you had to hit. And then transition from that, it ended up in a situation where almost getting fired to 6 months later, I was the number one selling door-to-door salesman in the company,
Amazing.
Canada-wide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hell
So
yeah.
that was one part of my career. Transitioned from there, doing door-to-door. Did that for a decent amount of time. Started doing direct sales, in-home selling. I was selling an Australian company, actually. They came to Canada, rebranded. It was a company called Kinetic Learning out of Australia. They rebranded to Academy One Learning in Vancouver specifically. And I was selling them. So they were selling like education packages, like tutoring packages to students on a laptop or a computer, from ranging from $6,500 to $13,000. And I had 90 minutes to 120 minutes to sell this to a family from the time I showed up to their house to the time I had to leave.
Wow.
I was leaving with $13,000, and their top 3 salesperson month over month for the entire time I was ever there. I realized at that point in time, put myself into a challenging situation again, transitioning to where the career came to today, was because I'd mastered the art of one-to-one selling and I got completely bored. And I wanted to master the art of one-to-many selling and doing marketing and copywriting and all that good stuff that came from that. And literally, that was a multi 6-figure job at 21, 22, doing pretty well, or 22, 23, sorry, doing pretty well for myself. And literally just walked into my boss's office one day and said, fuck it, I'm out. No rhyme or reason, just I'm out. I just kind of, it was like, I didn't want to do it anymore. Because my whole theory in life is like, if you're going to do something, just decide to do it and figure out.
Did you think about that for long before you made that call?
It kind of built up like subconsciously, slowly but steadily. I just kind of like lost passion for the job. Then I started asking for more challenging leads just to see if I could create like more of a spark back in. No matter how challenging the leads were, I was still selling. I was still doing numbers. And then like for me, it was once again the same conversation. Like, what else is there? Like, what more? Like, what more can I do? Like, I kind of hit that glass ceiling. Fast forward from that point on, dropped out and started to learn marketing, and kind of literally went from 6 figures to almost 6 figures in debt, and close to that or so. And from there, turned around. And,
How?
well, I had no income.
You were just living it up and
Living it up. I went from the lifestyle of like going out every weekend, partying all the time, paying for friends, doing dumb shit. So like I was making good money, but not saving anything. Because I was never taught, like, parents always said, save money, save money, save money. It's like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do that later on in my life.
because you knew you were going to get to a point where you made a lot of money.
Exactly. It was just kind of like that whole subconscious conversation with myself, and it didn't get there. And it went from that to, literally to a point where I remember very, very distinctly that I was coming to Australia for the very first time with my wife and her mom. This is my fiance, she was fiance at the time. And I'd built up a bunch of debt on my credit cards, and I'd gone and sold a bunch of stuff to pay off my credit.
How old were you here?
24.
24. How old are you now?
31.
31, yeah.
And got to that point where I paid off my credit card. I called up the bank, and I'm sitting down, and I'm like, this next morning I'm leaving for Australia. I was like, hey, I just paid off the credit card. I don't see it hit the bank. I don't see it on my online banking anymore. What's going on? They're like, oh yeah, as soon as the money hit the card, we deleted the card off your account, so you don't have a credit card with us anymore.
Ruthless.
So now I'm getting like, well, what the hell do I do? Do I go to Australia? Do not? All this other crazy shit. And then, long story short, I ended up doing the trip, borrowed some money from my parents, did the trip, had the trip, came back. But this entire time I was spending a lot of time educating myself, and absolutely reading books, etc. Like some of the books that I've got an entire bookshelf there full of probably about 300 books that I've kind of at some point read or gone through some part of it at some point. So spent a lot of time in courses and books, reading and educating. And this came back from that. And 24 months later was doing multi 6 figures in my agency.
Awesome. I feel like agencies are such an easy model. Not easy to make it work, but it's easy entrance. It's like low barrier to entry. You can just.
It's a low barrier to entry. Absolutely. It's the quickest way to get to, $10,000 a month. No problem. In my personal opinion, if you're in a, if your back's up against the wall, go and just, it's service. At the end of the day, you're rendering service for somebody, your expertise or somebody else's delivery is all it comes down to. And yeah, I took everything that I was doing from the affiliate world, because I was making like small, a couple $100 here and there. It wasn't anything crazy, but like I had the knowledge base, and I just took that knowledge base and took my skill set of one-to-one selling, and I put the two together in the marketing field and built that.
You
to
sound
what
a
it
little bit like a young Ty Lopez here.
Hey, you never know. Soon enough, I'm gonna be like here in my garage with the
Exactly.
books.
It's exactly what I was thinking when you. What's that in the background there? You guys like full.
Signs that are just hanging on the wall.
No, no, the neon. There's neon stuff going on. The
Nothing?
neon light. No, can you turn the
So
camera that way?
Oh,
Yeah, what the
that's a
hell?
green screen.
Oh, it's a green screen. I thought you had
Green
like a rave party neon setup
That's
going there.
that's the signs for my company for the ads that I shoot there, and the green screen for all the other stuff that I shoot
For
there.
the listeners of the podcast, I'm just getting a tour of Rohan's office.
Yeah.
His home office. Beautiful, man. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that about the challenges. This is before we got into business. I know there's been a lot of insane stuff that's happened since then. But I've got a random question that's popped into my mind that I'm curious to know. If you could, like, you're obviously going to live out the rest of your life healthy and happy, fingers crossed. If you, like, 20-year version of you, so you just teleport 20 years down the into the future. There's like, no, you've lived out 20 years, and that version of you comes back to the version of you now. So you're like 31. So 51-year-old version of you. What do you reckon the 51-year-old version of you would tell you is your current biggest blind spot in life? Blind spot, meaning you're not aware of it yet.
The 51-year-old version of me telling the 31-year-old version of me what the current blind spot is.
Yeah, like something you haven't thought of before. If you somehow had to future pace it. I'm just curious.
If I were to future pace it, I think one of the biggest things it's funny, I went through this over the weekend with John.
D Martini for the folks that are listening.
D Martini, yeah. Is I don't give myself a lot of credit where credit is due, because I just kind of stay in the day to day and kind of just do what I'm kind of just, I run a lot of it through subconscious and just kind of based on decisions that need to be made at the time. And finding the balance in the decision, and then kind of go down that route. And like a lot of times people have a lot of times ask me, it's like, why haven't you gone and built out an information business and educate, people to a point of where you've come to? And it's like, it's that typical quote unquote cliche thing that most people talk about, the imposter syndrome. Whereas like, I don't really have, there's no reason to why I should be there, but I'd say that's a big blind spot of mine.
Dude, I really appreciate the vulnerability, man. That in itself is like very impressive. Why do you think the 51-year-old version of you would want to point that out? Like, why do you think would be a problem if it wasn't kind of like addressed?
I think it's just because if I'm future pacing myself and I look back, it's like, how much more could I have achieved if I didn't have that?
Meaning that, like, you would keep doing the things that you already know how to do well, which is strategically isolate opportunity and aggressively pursue it until it happens.
Correct.
But then you kind of are thinking that there's more opportunity in another way to live your life in a fulfilled way.
Yeah, in a way where it's just like, it's like, what you know what you're good at, how to scale companies. That's become like my, subconscious second nature skill set. It's like, why aren't I doing it more and taking bigger chunks of it? Maybe is it from the challenges that we've talked about prior to the podcast starting? I don't know. And stuff that I'm working through every single day. And it's like, it's at the end of the day, it's the balance and fantasy of balancing out the negative self-talk that goes on in our head, and what are we judging within ourselves a lot of the times.
Have you heard of EO or YPO?
The entrepreneur organization.
Yeah, I was in EO for a while. I only recently jumped out because I literally wasn't growing a business. So, but you catch up monthly with these dudes. They do, the guys in my group did anywhere from kind of like 8 mil a year to 150 mil a year. And we had one conversation that was on the topic of success versus fulfillment. And it was so interesting. Everyone in the group had some kind of unhealthy relationship with the way that they recognized what they'd achieved, and some people are in their 50s and they still struggled to give themselves permission to do things they enjoyed. Like I'll just make, you're not allowed to share exact stories from the thing, but I'll just make up a scenario. So like, which is close to what someone experiences, like a big successful firm in some kind of industry and loves creative projects, but never gives himself permission to do it because he just keeps hitting the next quarter's targets that he has to. And if he doesn't, he gets really frustrated at himself. He's in his 50s and he's got enough money to last like a solid few lifetimes. And it's just like that lack of permission to do what he actually wants to do. And I struggle with this so much so because my dream was always to be like a Tony Robbins style speaker, but I was always like, not successful enough yet, not successful enough yet, need more revenue, need more profit, need a bigger team, need more success behind me. And also before I give myself permission just to go after what I really want to do. That was my kind of like version of it. And it's very interesting because I see it with most entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it's definitely something. It's like, no matter what challenges that come through your life, is like you're always kind of going to look at what's the next biggest thing. But it's like, but if you don't have a mission or a purpose in life to fulfill, what are you here to do? Why are you kind of living your life a lot of times? And I think that's where one of the big changes that I'm working on very actively right now in 2021 is, I lived most of 2020 just in trying to survive, keeping the company afloat, keeping the company moving forward. And, we got hammered pretty heavily at the earlier stages of the COVID shutdown. Fortunately, we bounced back pretty quickly, but it was just like, what if, living in that what if? But it's like, yeah, what if it does happen? What's the worst case thing? Fucking build it back up again. You've done it once, you'll do it quicker the next time. So now
Yeah.
I'm living in the present and kind of living in the moment and
Yeah.
going through that.
Well, if you weren't allowed to rebuild an agency, or what would you do if you had to start from scratch right now?
Having the knowledge that I have today,
Um, yeah, let's say the business knowledge, but yeah, having the knowledge. Yeah.
yeah, having the business knowledge that I have today, what would I rebuild is I would go down the route of doing what I'm going down now, more focusing on is leverage buyouts. So going in and buying companies for pretty much zero down or owner financed and scaling them up.
Like a Roland
Correct.
phrases.
Roll.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool. And so
Very commercialized now, but yeah, exactly that.
So I've got a follow-up question that's like tightening the hold a little bit even more. If you were never going to get any cash, like you, no matter what you did from a career, you still have to work full time or more than full time, but there's no financial return from it. What you did, I mean, you could do anything. You could try to be a pro soccer player. You could anything. What would you choose to do if you had to start from a blank canvas now?
And I was not getting paid for it.
It's just not going to make, like, you could choose to be a hedge fund manager or you could be like a social worker and you get paid the same. Let's say you get paid 150K a year no matter what, or 200K a year.
What would I do? I would travel the world, sharing and inspiring more people with the craziness of my life and the stories that I have for people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just curious because I feel like when you ask that question, you understand. Like, I talked to James about this a bit. We've got a mutual friend, James Hepburn, who's coming on the podcast next. Um, and and we talk a lot about like what's the thing that really lights you up, and it's just it's interesting, just interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Life's so interesting. On the same token, hard work I've found, because I went on the old hippie journey where I just chilled out for a while and said, stuff it. I'm going to like challenge the part of me that needs to work to feel enough and just not work and to just attempt to enjoy my life in more of a like a chilled way, like a hippie way. And I lacked a lot of fulfillment. There was a lot of things that were fulfilling, but there's also hard work is fulfilling, especially for men. The,
Yeah.
the the need to do hard things is kind of ingrained into our biology. We like hard work. But yeah, what DeMartini talks about is the Taos, where it's like your highest mission, the thing where just easy and natural to do. You just want to do it all. Like you're willing to go through the challenges to pursue it because you love it that much. I'm curious to know what's the biggest thing that you've learned from DeMartini?
Living in your authentic self and living in your values.
Mm. Hell yeah. Do you want to explain what that means for the guys that are listening? At
Yeah.
a
So living in
particular
your
level?
values, most people live their lives. There's things that they value, there's things that they don't value in their life. But when we're building companies or working, we're usually doing it for an external reason that really doesn't bring fulfillment, like you said, into your life.
Mm.
What are the three common things that if you were to, Demarc got a full exercise on his website, and if you go on there, just figure out, breaking down to understand what your values are. Some people's values are family, some people's values are social, some people's values are business, and then there's, that's your number one thing, and then from there you got your other three. Like if there's the top three that has never deviated in the last 2 years has been business, learning, and travel. Now 2020 put a big challenge for me on travel, without a doubt. But I had to find a new way to how I was getting to travel without traveling. It's like sort of doing more Zoom calls with people in different parts of the world and kind of experiencing that part, even though physically I wasn't traveling, but it's like still understanding that whole thing. But in that moment, my values shifted a little bit because I had a baby, and kind of the values went from traveling to family. And family's kind of always been in my top five. It just kind of moved around and always moves around. For me, business and learning has been my number one and number two at any given time. Sometimes they flip, where learning is number one and business is number two, and sometimes it's business number one, learning is number two. So for me, it's been that, because before I was living from a perspective of, I'm doing this for money, I'm doing this for social proof, I'm doing this for fame, I'm doing this for the shit that just didn't matter to me. It's like,
Mm.
right, I built a pretty decent sized network. I've built a, decently successful company. And it all came from me living in the values that I truly enjoy doing. Because I will wake up every single day and go to work for the companies, no matter whether I got paid or I did it in the company after, because I absolutely enjoy it. I'd wake up every single day and learn, no matter what, whether I got paid to do it or not. I wake up every single day and had the opportunity to get on a plane and travel to a different part to, visit a new country and live in a new culture and taste the new foods. You wouldn't need to pay me to do that. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Imagine if you did get paid to do that.
And I
Just go
did.
to a new
And I truly did. In 2019, the amount that I traveled, the amount of cultures that I got to visit, the amount of business that I had, the amount of learning that came from it all was one of the best years of my entire fucking life.
In other words, the most authentic years of your life because it was so aligned to your values.
Very, very much so.
So that's the biggest thing that you get from DeMartini. I'm curious to know, what's your biggest unanswered question or thing that you still think about when it comes to DeMartini's lessons? Is there anything that you just like can't wrap your head around, or that you just doesn't resonate?
I have this with him, and I literally had a chat with him on Sunday with it, because I was just spent 3 days with him. His values, he's got a very, very high value on learning, and he's also got a very, very high value on science. And a lot of his correlations to that he teaches is science based. So sometimes, like, I learn something, especially through his higher level courses, it's so fucking science based, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck about science, bro. But it's like I need to sit there and listen to it multiple times to digress it and then understand it the way I'm going to take it in. Whereas the person wouldn't be able to sit through that, and like that's the reason why his world of mastery is very focused on a certain type of person.
Yes.
And every single time, whether I've done master planning, whether I did prophecy, whether I've done the wealth acceleration, financial trainings with him, whichever ones I've done with him, they're always, the core understanding is the science of it that he's kind of, his research is based around that. So it's like that's been my big thing. It's like, bro, this scientific shit, get rid of it. Explain to me on a human fucking conversational basis.
Yeah.
Then he kind of like snaps out of it and then gives it to me.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point, because there's a higher chunk important learning, I think, in that for people that approach personal development, is that whenever you're learning from someone in particular, a thought leader or an expert of some way, that they're always projecting their values into the model of what they teach. And a lot of people don't have the self-awareness and self-worth to then be able to filter it through their own values and filter it through their own character and filter it through their own strengths and weaknesses to know how it's actually going to be relevant and improve their quality of life. So a lot of people don't look, because they're looking for certainty so much. And most experts and thought leaders are so certain on whatever they say. So you go to one seminar, take the certainty. People are just, this is the way it needs to be. It's all about, like, even me, I'm about courage. It's always about courage. it's not always about courage. Sometimes it's about the opposite. Sometimes it's about comfort and just chilling and giving yourself a pat on the back and just relaxing. So it's like discerning. And you're so right. He's so impressively intellectual and intelligent, and his models are based around connecting dots. And he's connected like every dot that could be connected pretty much by studying everything that could be studied pretty much. And that's through the lens of like logic and results as opposed to experience and emotion, but he's got an intellectual view on the emotion, but it's not a actual, you get what we're saying. I think that's really valuable to hear. Thank you for sharing that. And he's a genius,
Absolutely.
this guy. Such a genius.
Yeah. Definitely is trying to get as much out of him as I possibly can in the times that he's going to teach, because we know they're also going to slow down soon.
We'll see. I feel like he'll keep people guessing on that front, because has he said anything about it, or you're just making a presumption because he's been doing it for 40 years?
Like he's going to still do some of his advanced classes and stuff. So, but I think on his like simpler stuff, like the breakthrough experience, his daughter's doing more. Obviously now that he's seen, one of his big values were traveling the world, and he didn't get to do it this year, but it's also given him, he's seen the other side and the balance of it, that now he's doing a lot more through Zoom and classes and stuff, where he's realizing that he can live on his ship and do some of the classes that he wants to do, which he's going to be doing as soon as he gets the chance to. So who knows what he's going to do in person. But I know it's more and more talk, because I'm very, very close with the guys at the DeMartini Institute, like his daughters. I was talking to her earlier this week, and it's like just the conversation, the where it's going, and the questions that come out of it, you can see that it's going towards John taking a little bit more of a step back and enjoying his life. I think a little bit more while he still teaches. He's still never going to not teach. I don't think he's going to do. Who knows if he'll do,
One of his top 3 values. And to be embodying what it is that he teaches, he must continue to teach. It's in his blood. To show up and run the same seminar, workshop every weekend, pretty much for 40 years.
It's next level.
It's next level. You got it. If you didn't love it, imagine if he was just like, well, I said that I got to stick by my values, so I have to run it to be in alignment with my method. But he actually hates it.
I've never seen a guy that can go like, no, I'm going to be doing an event with him later on this year where it's going to be 10 days, probably around 12 plus 13 plus hours a day. And I was like, and I couldn't fathom that. But then when I did the 7 days with him of Prophecy One experience and going through 7 days of like 14 plus hours a day with him, I was like, no coffee, just water. Like, and then sitting in the room and talking, I'm like,
there's a secret. There's a secret to how he does it. And this is the secret. I'm going to show it. I want you to like commentate what I'm doing, so that the people that are listening can, because they obviously can't see what I'm doing. But this is the secret. All right, ready?
oh, and he's continuing moving in one spot. Yeah.
Have you seen him do that?
Yeah, all the time.
He's always walking with his knees, like just motoring them.
Yeah.
I reckon it's part of his secret. I reckon it like keeps his body going and keeps him energized.
Probably, for sure. Like even when he's sitting nowadays on Zoom, like even over the weekend, he's like sitting and he's like, you can just see him like, and it looks like someone called him out and said like, do you have what's the disease of where you're continually shaking and moving all the time? But he's like, they call him Parkinson's disease. Yeah, they're like, Parkinson's. Like, no, I actually just sit here and bounce in my chair all day.
I think it's a secret to his energy. Kind of like what Tony Robbins does to the trampoline thing. Like
jumping the whole time.
He's actually a raging Tony Robbins fan. Closeted Tony Robbins. Imagine that.
That would be unfair.
Actually, the first time, because I was such a hardcore Tony, and I still am. I was such a hardcore Tony Robbins fan, and I've never been exposed to DeMartini. The first time I did the breakthrough experience, I got in like a 45-minute hardcore debate with him in front of the whole room about state management and how you can actually experience more positive traits than negative traits. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And I was like so attached to it. It was crazy. But good times. It was good fun. Man, I would like to know how you would want the people who are listening, who are presumably into business or romanticize about the idea of being in business. You are hard in the sense that you have an erect penis. Jokes. You're hard in the sense that you have gone through a lot of crap.
Yeah.
You have gone through, we were talking about it before we started this podcast, we're like sharing battle stories. Battle stories. Yeah, battle wounds. got plenty. Like, what would you, because you want to do a lot of inspiring and sharing your story and have it help other people. What would you like, what are the three biggest things that you'd want people to know from your experience in business before starting or in order to start scaling effectively a business?
Good question. The three biggest things that I probably want people to know before they started or scaled a business is number one. Here's speaking of DeMartini. I was highly infatuated with the idea of wanting to build and scale a company, but what the fuck was I building and scaling a company for? Now that infatuation of wanting to do it, having the skill set that I'd already built in sales, I knew I could do it.
So let's pause for a second in case someone doesn't know DeMartini. Infatuation means when you look at a certain activity or goal or something and you assume that there's actually going to be more good than bad or more benefits than drawbacks of doing that. So when people are infatuated with business or a girl or a partner that they're going to go into a relationship with, they're blinded to the drawbacks that are going to come from it. They're just looking at all the good shit.
Yeah.
Just want to say that.
So I was very, very infatuated with that idea. And trying to do that at the earlier stages of my company, built it pretty damn fast, and it fucking torched it just as quickly. I balanced myself out, and I learned it's like, okay, why did that happen? And then I started to obviously go and dig more into the world of, balance and because at the end of the day, no matter which way you look at it in your business, like there's benefits and drawbacks. There's in everything that you do. I just didn't see the all I saw was benefits of building and scaling a company. I didn't see the drawbacks of building and scaling a company. Now, on one side,
what are some of the drawbacks that you think would be helpful for people to know?
The drawbacks of building and scaling a company, on one thing, when you attract more wealth, you attract more haters a lot of times. That's from a social perspective. You got to learn to deal with that. I'm sure you've seen that in your day.
Certainly.
When you build a company from a financial standpoint, it comes more headaches in terms of dealing with lawyers and dealing with insurance things, et cetera, that you need to make sure that your ass is covered. Nobody teaches you that. You end up going through lawsuits and you don't have insurance and you're like, what the fuck? $7,000 insurance bill could have saved me a $50 or $100,000 legal bill for no reason. So it's like the drawbacks there. Scaling a company, your team's going to grow. Yes, there's benefits to building a big team and scaling that. However, the drawbacks of building a team also comes at the expense of offices, at the expense of when they're sick and time off, and then taking responsibility for the pandemic hits and trying to, do you furlough them? Do you keep them? Do not? It's like things that you like. Literally, now you're building a company not just to feed you and your family and put food for you and your family on the table, but for 20, 30, 50, depending how big your team is. Every decision is now a ripple effect. It's not a one person effect. It's not like a self decision. It's a entire. Every time I look at it, making a decision in the company, it's like, how many people is this going to affect? Good, positively, and or negatively. And if I can't find both, I won't make that decision.
Wow. Unless it's balanced and you've got a completely balanced perspective, you don't make the call. Yeah.
If it's one side, if it's swayed to one side or the other, then it's not worth doing.
Perceivingly.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I'll literally sit down on a piece of paper on my computer and I'll draw and I'll write it out, like the benefits and drawbacks. And if they're not close enough in aggregation of like one's more than the other, like considerably more than the other, I'm not doing it.
Because it's still a perception, right?
It's still a perception at the end of the day, but you're getting everything out on, contextually to see in front of you, black and white.
Yeah. So you're essentially saying, like, let's say you want to make a decision, you're just seeing benefit. You can't find the drawbacks. You will literally go, there's a big ass booby trap in this, and I ain't going to make that call.
Exactly. I'm not going to be infatuated by doing it at all.
Yeah. That'd be very interesting for people to hear listening to this. That because I hear it all the time. Like when I catch up with friends that are newer to business, they're like, yeah, I'm doing this. And, it's so awesome. I got this and this and this. I can just as a business owner, it's just got a bit more experience, see all the things that they're not seeing already and just go, man, this person's in for an absolute world of pain.
A lot of the times it's like, I sit there like I'm sitting trying to fucking keep my mouth shut in a chair because I'm like, I can give you all of this context, but it's like giving someone the information that you've already gone through is pointless and they're asking you for it. The one thing that I ask them is like, okay, that's great. Like, phenomenal, like, well done, you're excited, etc. Have you sat down and put down on a piece of paper everything that could go wrong and just be quiet? And a lot of times you just like take them out of like that entire, like you can see people's physical demeanor just change. They're like, you asshole, I was so excited, and I just pulled that out of me.
Totally.
But it's like,
Actually,
no,
such
man,
a loving thing to do. Yeah, such a loving thing to do. Okay, cool. So that's the first thing. You would say, don't like be aware of the drawbacks. Watch out for your infatuations is the first thing you'd want people to know. What are the other two?
The other two I would probably say is when going to build or scale a company is start to realize, and this is something that I made a mistake early on, was, and I read the book, The E-Myth. I'm sure you've read the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
I haven't read it, but I get the gist. I've read
Yeah.
some of it.
And he talks about, working on your business, not in your business. I worked in the business way too long to the point where you hit that point of burnout, whichever, at the end of the day, burnout is really not a state of being. It's just a term that most people look at. It's just you end up losing the reason to why you're doing the business. That's all burnout is.
Yeah.
And then you take that and you put it into working on your business and having a goal and a plan and a set time that you want to achieve that by, and staying consistent with the daily micro commitments to get to that point. You'll enjoy the process more than just going one speed go and then hitting a wall and saying, what the fuck did I do all this for?
So I want to relay back so to see if I get this straight and to help clarify for the listeners. E-Myth is all about understanding the three main roles that you can play in a business. You can either play the entrepreneur's role, which is the person that's on the business running it. You get the manager role, which is the person that's doing like the operations of the like people, processes, and then you've got the technician role, which is the areas of specialty, whether it's within marketing, sales, product / delivery, operations, or finance. And so you're essentially saying understand which one you want to play, or are you saying don't do the technician and manager?
Understand which one you want to play, and then make sure that you build a goal to keep to that.
Yeah.
So then that way you're trying to do things, because it's like at the end of the day, if you don't want to be the entrepreneur, you don't want to be the CEO of the company, you don't have to. You can pay people to do it.
Yeah, so true. It's so that you're exactly right. Because what happened with me moving into manager and too much, because if there's I enjoy all three of those to a certain percentage. Managerial will be the lowest percent, technician would be quite a high percent, entrepreneur would be a medium percent. So it's like I really enjoy speaking, but speaking
Yeah.
is technician role. It could be under the job title of a CEO still, but as being out there and being the face, I know that's part of being a visionary, but it's still, yeah, I went way too much into manager. If we're just going to go put that in the category like operations and not enough time in technician. So my imbalance, I had a huge imbalance, and that's why I did burnout. It was a really good point, man. That's sick. That's a great piece there, dude. What's the third one you'd give?
The third one that I would probably give is one that I'm starting to realize that I didn't do a lot of, and I'm starting to be more focused, and it's like finding the balance. You'll never find work-life balance is 50-50, ever. And if anybody tells you that, they're selling you a bunch of bullshit, because at the end of the day, go back to your values, your life's going to run based on the values that you have in your life. But making sure that you are being fair to every single other person in your life throughout the entire process of building the business. Because a lot of times you get into business and then you forget about family and you forget about all the other things. They've got their benefits, they've got their drawbacks, no matter what. But it gets to a situation where you actually take the time, whether it's a weekend a month or a dedicated time a month or in a week, and give that to the people that have given back to you. And spend quality time with them every single month, whether it's an afternoon or a day or an evening or a date night with your partner or whatever it is. Just kind of go down that route, because that makes a big difference. And 2020 was a big realization for me, because within 1 month of having a kid and then losing my dad, that was like the entire world of transformation. I saw it from both sides, that I realized was like, damn, I need to make
Sorry to
some
hear
change.
about your dad passing. I didn't actually know that, Rohan.
Yeah. So that happened within a month of that, within 1 month of each other happening. And that was more of like a realization to see, okay, I went too hard on one side and, didn't give them enough time. But at the end of the day, can I beat myself up about it? No, I did it. And, there was benefits of it. There were drawbacks from it. There were benefits while I was sick, that I'd been working as hard as I did in 2019. was able to take care of a lot of other things that probably wouldn't have been able to do prior to.
That's beautiful, man. I think a big part of that, from my perspective, in terms of looking after the people that are in your life during the journey of business, is understanding what the expectations are from their point of view. Because,
Yeah.
and that just comes down to constant communication. It's like just speaking to people and finding out what because when you said to be fair to the people in your life, what someone else considers to be fair is going to be very different.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's also finding out what their values are and doing things that they value and finding something that meets in the middle of both of yours. So you can both enjoy the reason to why you're on this fucking planet in the first place.
I love that. I haven't thought about that for a while. I remember connecting that dot when I was at a breakthrough experience, which I've done a few times, but connecting what you do with that person. So it's a mutual exchange of values where you both have some kind of enjoyment between it. To be honest with you, I think that's like a big reason that I don't chat to, or it is the reason why I lose touch with certain people, because it's not a 50-50
Fair exchange.
yeah, fair exchange in terms of the way in which we interact doesn't light both of our values up. It's a really, really interesting point, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. It's been a great chat so far, man. I've got one more question for you. Before I ask you this question though, we wrap up. Man, I want to honor you. I want to honor you. You've been so vulnerable in this conversation, man. You're a very well-rounded dude that's very vulnerable and open. I really appreciate that about you. I guess it's because you love learning so much. Like I really love that there's just a lot of authenticity that comes from you. And it's very it's refreshing, and it's enjoyable to be around, man. And also you are a very courageous you make shit happen, and that's inspiring. I think it's going to be really cool to see you out there in the world inspiring people more, because you have a really inspiring story, and you're a very, very a genuine dude. I really enjoyed this chat, man. It's great to be reconnected again. So thank you. Thanks for being you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share this with your audience.
Pleasure, man. Pleasure. So my final question for you is, random person comes to you. You don't know whether they're male or female. You don't know how old they are. You don't know anything about them. All you know is they want to give you $1 million in a briefcase in exchange for what you would consider to be the most valuable tool, piece of advice, practice that you know, because they want to attribute, they just fancy you big time, and they want to attribute that much value to what you're going to give them. What would be the single most valuable thing objectively that you could give to someone?
What part of life, though?
The whole life, the whole gamut, you could say.
If there's one thing, and I think it just comes down to it, the more and more I can't harp on this enough, is just living in a state of authenticity and living in a state of balance.
Explain them. Just go a little, like, one layer deeper and explain those, because they're very powerful.
The big thing is, like, most people are like, they're living their life for somebody else. They want the more followers to prove that they can feel worthy, but the followers are for who? Not for yourself. They're to make you look good for somebody else, but are they actually making you look good? The money that comes from that makes you for who? What are you doing with that money that's going to make a big difference? And understanding, like, why are you doing every single piece in your life, and kind of going down that road. And earlier on the podcast, we talked about all the crazy things of not having any money to building to what I have today is phenomenal, because it made me realize the value of that extra dollar, that extra $10, that extra $1 million. And it came from the perspective of not having anything. Whereas, living in a state of balance and authentic self is like, you see people that have perfect example, people that win the lottery. Just as fast as they win the lottery, they fucking go broke. And broke when they won the lottery the first time. Why? Because they didn't have a state of balance, and they weren't living in their authentic self when that money came to them.
So I get the authentic self piece. I want you just to go one extra layer of depth with the explaining what balance. Like, so this person's like, okay, cool, I'm about to give you $1 million. What's the balance?
Mental state of balance. So, like, it goes back to the negative self-talk, right? A lot of the times is like who is the one person you're having a conversation with 24/7? Yourself. Exactly. And it's majority of the time, it's either you're beating yourself up for something that you wish you did do or didn't do, or you're having this high of understanding, oh, fuck, I'm going to, this ego side, narcissistic side of you starts to come out. It's finding that in that moment, the feedback of each and why you're having those conversations so that you're okay with those conversations. A lot of the times when you're in a negative self-talk, you're self-depreciating yourself and getting into that depressed state of mind because you're comparing that your life could be better than it currently is.
Yes. So what you're saying is people that are listening to like this person with the advice is don't be inflated. Don't think that you're all like better than other people, and don't and when you're in those times where you're feeling better than other people, just humble yourself down. Realize where you're actually the areas that you're not looking at, where you're actually not pulling your weight, just so you got a more balanced perspective. And when you're also thinking you're way worse than other people and you're feeling really deflated, then
What
just
have you,
boost
the,
yourself up a bit. See how you're actually shining.
well, look like a perfect example. Like the most recent one that I can think of is Elon Musk breaks the richest man in the world. Accolades out the fucking wazoo. Every news channel's talking about it. Every magazine article's talking about it. What does he tweet? Oh, really? Back to work. Instantly balance himself from that situation. Didn't get
Yeah, that's really powerful that he did it himself. It's a good word as well. I'm gonna wazoo accolades out the wazoo. That's a good one.
yeah. But it's right. There's a reason to why he's had the success that he's had, because he came from all of that, gave it all it went. Look at where he's at now. Doesn't put himself on a pedestal. At least from the outside, we don't know internally the conversation he's having within himself. But he's been able to, like, even while all of that's going on, his thing is like, oh, really? Back to work.
Yeah, and he understands the sacrifices that he's making that the people that are infatuated with his position would not be willing to make, which is the ridiculous amount of detriment on his relationships, his health, and the time that he gets to spend. It's all like 99% of time outside sleeping would be working. That's a beautiful way to end this, man. Thank you so much for jumping on. It's been a pleasure to see you again.
Likewise, dude. Thanks for having me. It's definitely been amazing to be chatting with you after all these years, to say the least.
Yeah, it's been 3.5 years.
3.5 years, yeah?
3 years and 3 months, to be exact.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.